Zelli, and it is my honor to welcome the CMC members, alternates, members of the public, if you're tuning in. Just a couple of reminders. We all know this is a virtual meeting, but you are free to ask questions if you're coming in from the public. The best way to do that is to email Sophia at sophia.ginis, Ginis, at metrotransit.org. And if you have any questions or comments you want to make before December 27th, those will be posted and the questions will be compiled on the project's website. And I often get this question, can you have a copy of the PowerPoint? And yes, you can at the blue line ext.org. That's the website for the project. Blue line ext, one word, .org. So why don't we establish our quorum by introducing ourselves by organization, and as we've done, and that works pretty well. I'll name the organization and people can kind of just speak up. So starting with the Met Council members.
Hi, I'm Reva Chambliss, Vice Chair of the Metropolitan Council Transportation Committee. District 2.
I don't see anybody else. Hennepin County.
Jeff Lundy, Hennepin County Commissioner. Thank you.
Right, Jeff. I think Irene was going to be here. Maybe she's late. Brooklyn Park.
Tanya West Hafner, council member and mayor pro tem.
Welcome. All right, Crystal.
Hi, I'm Jim Adams, mayor.
Jim. And Robbinsdale. Usually Bill's here. All right, how about Golden Valley?
Jillian Rosenquist, council member and alternate for Mayorship Harris.
Hey, welcome. All right, City of Minneapolis.
Good afternoon. Abdi Salah, alternate for Mayor Fry.
Hi, Adi. Okay, Brooklyn Center. Brooklyn Center, no. Okay, New Hope, I know is here.
Kathy Himken, non-voting member from New Hope, mayor.
All right, how about Maple Grove? All right, Osseo? Anyone from Osseo? All right, how about the Minneapolis Park Board? Must be getting close to the holidays. People are busy on a Friday. We're missing a few. Blue Line Coalition.
Hi, this is Nicole Bueller for the Blue Line Coalition.
Hi, Nicole. All right, the Community Advisory Committee.
Sorry, Chair. Denise Butler here for the Blue Line Coalition as well.
Oh, hi, Denise. No problem. All right, the CAC, I think we have.
Hi, this is Jason Greenberg, co-chair of the Community Advisory Committee and Robbinsdale resident.
Perfect. The BAC, the Business Advisory Committee.
Afternoon, everyone. Felicia Perry, co-chair of the Business Advisory Committee.
Hey, it's Felicia. And how about the MAC, the Airports Commission?
Good afternoon, Chair Zelli and members. Bridget Reif, Vice President for Planning and Development with the MAC.
Hi, Bridget.
Big time baker too, by the way.
Hey, you know, that's a good thing. MnDOT is here.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Barnes, MnDOT's Metro District Engineer.
Hi, Mike. And Metro Transit.
Good afternoon, Nick Thompson, Deputy General Manager at Metro Transit.
So that is the list. Did I miss anybody? All right, we can march through our agenda. We have a lot of subjects to cover. We're going to talk about recently revealed reports, progress with our anti-displacement work. But first, let's approve the minutes. They were sent out a week ago for the meeting on November 12th. And if there's any edits or corrections, please let us know so staff can capture those. And if not, I would invite a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
So moved, Lundy.
Thank you. Thanks. Jeff?
Second, West Hafner.
Adams.
Great, thank you. And with no other discussion, Dawn, can you call the roll?
Councilmember Chambliss? Here. Commissioner Lundy?
Aye.
Abdi Salah?
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenquist?
I abstain as I was not at that meeting.
Mayor Adams?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem West Hafner?
Aye.
Denise Butler?
Aye.
Nicole Bueller?
Aye.
Bridget Reef?
Aye.
Mike Barnes?
Aye.
Jason Greenberg?
Aye.
Felicia Perry?
I am abstaining. I did not receive those minutes.
Okay, and Chair Zelli?
Aye. So the minutes are approved. Let's jump into committee reports, starting with the Community Advisory Committee. And I think that's you, Jason, as chair.
Yep. So we had a light attendance, I think, just with the holidays and everything, but definitely a lively discussion in our most recent meeting. Spent a lot of time really digging in with Terrence and the anti-displacement group. So lots of questions around the makeup. I mean, we were getting a presentation about the makeup of the anti-displacement working group, but who had representation and how that representation was reflecting the community. So lots of discussion around that, lots of questions. And I think also that's going to lead to some follow-up in subsequent meetings. Obviously spent a good chunk of time talking about the draft report, and then really kind of dug into one of the topics or one of the criteria to really kind of go in depth on that. And that's how we approached it on the CAC, and had lots of questions around, how those criteria, I mean, obviously there's lots of definitions there, but a lot of questions around, why this over that. And I think got to the point where it, that's really what the project is looking for, is the feedback from the community and the response to the draft report on why those decisions were made, which ones people feel are appropriate, or where there are maybe some disagreements, and that's helpful in driving the project forward.
Great, thank you. Well,
Yep.
let's hear from the Business Advisory Committee, and then we can open up for questions. Felicia, are you taking that report?
I sure can. Thank you, Chairman Zelli. The Business Advisory Committee, similarly, we go my notes, so I'm not making things up. Similar to the Community Advisory Committee, the Anti-Displacement Work Group gave an update, and we'll receive that today, so I won't go over any of those details, but I was happy to learn from the team that they're interested in recommendations from folks from Business Advisory Committee for folks to actually join the Anti-Displacement Work Group. So I'm excited to see that moving forward. We also got a review of the draft route modification report overview. And folks did raise some really important questions around whose input was included in the report, how much information, or how the information was like gathered. And also a few members of the BAC encouraged the project team to include their input as they've been involved in and following this work. And also a lot of us impacted by something like this project and have a lot of valuable input and want to help with the project as well. So we want to make sure that, and they were receptive to getting that additional input. And then we also went over November engagement. And I was happy to learn that we are in a 45-day comment period. So in my mind, that kind of activated myself and other BAC members to make sure that we're checking in with the engagement cohort and collaborating with them to additionally learn more and also be a resource in those spaces. And y'all will get an overview of that as well. And then we also got to review some next steps as we're looking into preparing for 2022. So the work continues. I don't know if I missed anything. I'm not sure who is on the meeting who was also at the BAC committee meeting. So please add if I missed anything.
Great, thank you. Any comments from anyone for our committees? We're getting into those subjects, so appreciate that input.
I just wanted to note that the Brooklyn Park Mayor, Lisa Jacobson, is on the line as well.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Riva, for pointing that out. Welcome. Let's get into our next subject. We're really thrilled that C. Terrence Anderson is with us again and going to be for a while. You know, and I think we're all eager to see the formation of the working group and how that works, and particularly important that we are thinking about the importance of this working group, that it isn't a side kind of operation. This is really central along with our technical work, along with everything else. So we really are bringing it up to speed and having we spent some time talking about the membership at our last meeting. So I'm looking forward to hearing your report. Welcome, C. Terrence.
Thank you very much, Chair Zelli. It's good to be here with all of you. So yes, I appreciate the way you presented that. Indeed, this is going to be very central work. I've been having a lot of conversations with community and other folks about the formation of this group, and I think it's, of course, of the utmost importance to get this group from the very beginning built in with trust, both within community and implementers, of course, like government, philanthropy, and others as well. And so without further ado, just sort of talk about the structure that we've come up with, of course, with a commentary. Had some good conversations with the BAC and the CAC earlier this week. And yeah, so let's jump into it. I'm not sure who's on the slide today. I'm guessing it's Sophia. Can jump to the next slide. One after that, actually. So, you know, generally when we've been talking to folks, you know, of course, getting an understanding of, oh, Jason's running the slides. Thanks, Jason. Getting an understanding of, you know, what is this core group's, you know, initiative to do? Like, what are we hoping to do? One is develop recommendations that can be practically implemented, right? Nobody's very interested in leaving this work with, well, you should study more of this, or we need to know more about this. No, we need to know about those things and study what we need to study in the context of this group around displacement in the Blue Line Extension corridor, and get to that point where, hey, these are recommendations that can be practically implemented, but also impactful towards preventing displacement in the corridor. We want to work through existing tensions between various interests. Sort of part of what I mean by that, I don't mean tensions in a negative sense. Tensions just sort of exist amongst different interested parties that they might feel they might not get what they ultimately need. But also it's just a sort of working through what might be a distrustful structure if it was just there's no conflict, there's no tension between the folks who are recommending and the folks who are implementing. And we sort of get to the end of this process and the recommendations sort of disappear behind a black curtain, to be reinterpreted, to be implemented or not implemented without any sense of transparency, right? I think it's part of building a transparent and an accountable structure in which we can actually have dialogue between those who are making the recommendations and those who will be implementing them in order for them to be the most impactful and practically implementable recommendations that they can be. Ultimately, we know everybody is very busy, so this is yet another, of course, important body of work, but amongst many other bodies of work that are really important. So what we really are designing the structure around is knowing that people have a lot of things going on in their lives, but we also need to get to a deep dive. We need to get to the nuance of this particular recommendations, right? It can't be, uncognizant of, say, the legal frameworks in which law and policy can be implemented in Minnesota, within the cities or in the county. Needs to be aware of those things, as well as knowing, the depth of the impact or the depth of the problem. So how do we get to enough of a depth within this work, knowing that folks are really busy? Certainly a challenge. And then we want to develop structures around the group that allow the group to develop clarity and ideas while also bringing along implementers for the discussion. And so this is just a really important point about, why we're taking a research-centered approach or a knowledge-based approach within this work, knowing that, of course, people can make, recommendations probably from the seat that they're sitting in right now, but getting into that more nuance, getting into the depth allows folks to have clarity around the ideas that they're submitting, and for them to be practically implementable. Going to the next slide, Jason. The general activity. So this is what everybody on the group will be doing. Everybody within this anti-displacement work group will be advising on the research agenda and project organizing. So one thing that I think is sort of subtext within that is that the anti-displacement working group isn't the only place in which we'll be connecting with the public about anti-displacement work that we're doing, right? It's a core place that we're doing it. We're obviously going to be doing, or maybe not obviously, we'll be going throughout community and a broader public engagement strategy, to both, talk about the research, to get opinions and feedback on different recommendations, so on and so forth. But the group that will be advising us to do that will be this group primary. That's their primary role. And again, number two, making meaning of research findings. So I think it's one thing for us to gather, do a bunch of research, gather a bunch of data, and then for Kira behind our own sort of, curtain, make meaning and say, hey, this is what everybody meant, right? And that doesn't really build sort of trust and accountability amongst that. So part of what we're planning to do within sort of a participatory research style is to make meaning of the research, of the data with this group. So we'll be getting a lot of data. We'll be sort of designing the process in a way where we process all the data together to make meaning of it as well. Three, to, of course, make those recommendations to address displacement within the Blue Line Extension Corridor, both policy and investments that the public and private sectors can implement. And then four, at times they'll be participating in the anti-displacement engagement to different interests on the project. So again, it's not just engaging this group, but engaging the broader public, particularly within the corridor. These folks will be participating. I'll be talking about the different roles of the different folks. So going to the next slide, Jason. Let's see, this is the membership slide. There we go, thanks, Jason. So who is this group? Ultimately, we came up with, we're seeking around 21 members, and I don't want to get overly caught up in the numbers on this group. This is the general direction that we want to point to, but if it ends up being a little bit more people, I think that's perfectly fine. I'm sure we could fill this group up with 50 folks, and but that would be really hard to manage. And so we're really pointing towards getting around 21 members, made up of generally 6 government representatives, 6 community members affiliated with organizations and businesses, 6 non-affiliated community members, and 3 representatives of the philanthropic community in the Twin Cities. I'm going to jump into the next slides as we talk about each of the individual roles, why we came up with these folks. So generally, we want members from, of course, the core cities, the Metropolitan Council and Hennepin County, of course, Minneapolis, Robbinsdale, Crystal, and Brooklyn Park. I know there's interest from other governments. I think at one of the earlier meetings, Minneapolis Parks Board is like, hey, we should be at the table because we're doing lots of work. It's like, great, let's make it happen. But generally, we want folks from these governments. And ultimately, what we're looking for is not electeds, right? Folks who are not elected, but they are, staff within these governments. Hopefully, we would hope that they are staff that are at a high enough level in which their work has sort of a broad range of influence, but also, more importantly, understanding. Because we want folks who can speak with some level of authority, some level of confidence about, say, the legal frameworks in which different policies exist, to know about the resources that each of these governments might be able to contribute. Generally, we're not talking about transit folks. We're talking, folks who will be implementing policy or investment around displacement. So this might be housing folks. Of course, that's going to be within this group, but it also might be folks from economic development or planners. That different sort of thing as well might be possible, depending on the government, depending on the way that those governments are structured. But it's not just those folks who will be at the table. What we're also asking for as part of a support structure for this group is that one member will lead a group within those governments made up of a broader collection of people to ultimately to bring back the conversation that we're having at the Anti-Displacement Working Group, to provide feedback back to the groups, right? So it'll be the one person at the Anti-Displacement Working Group table and a collection of people back within these governments, right? These could be researchers, maybe they might be electeds, maybe they might be, folks from different departments that all might make sense in the context of what we generally know anti-displacement work will be headed towards. So building that structure really allows us to have a dialogue throughout this whole process about the intricacies and the nuance of what this group is talking about the things that we learn from the research, and ultimately to get feedback about the recommendations before they're officially made, right? So say a group says, I like this policy. Great. Hey, can we implement this policy within the city? That city says, hey, no, that's more of a county thing, or we can do that, but we also need the county to do this aspect of it. Like, how do we get into that dialogue loop? Will partially exist through the existence of these internal groups and the one person who sits at the table. So ultimately, what we find that role to be is that one member at the table will structure recommendations back to their governments. They'll assist the anti-displacement working group in developing achievable recommendations, right? If you have the policy implementers or the investment implementers at the table, then they can give insight on the ways that they can do that the group can recommend that effectively. To provide data and other information back to the research team, right? We don't want FOIA requests right now. That could take a long time. But how can we get sort of a clear pathway to get data when we need that in the context of research? To provide response back to the anti-displacement group recommendations in real time. So as they're getting closer to the recommendations, these folks can help advise and give response back. And then, of course, to participate in the general anti-displacement working group activities. I think this is really important because, of course, what I've been saying, there is no legal responsibility for any government, I'm sure all of you are aware, to take these recommendations and be mandated to implement them, right? That's just simply not the structure by which they exist. So community becomes very interested. It's like, well, what are they going to do? Like, are they going to do what we say they're going to do, or are they going to follow the recommendations or not? So I think what largely I've been thinking about is what gives us the best chance for the recommendations that are made at this table to be accepted and then follow, of course, the distinct policymaking processes that each government has, and for them to sort of interpret those at the highest level, maybe not at the lowest level. I think that begins with, one, governments not being surprised about this process and the work that comes out of it, not be surprised about the recommendations that are moving forward, but can more work as partners and advisors along the way where it makes sense, in order for those recommendations to be mutually accepted from sort of a shared analysis about the situation and a shared analysis about the potential impact from these groups. So I think it's really important that governments are at that table, a part of that support structure in dialogue throughout the whole process. And this is the way that we're imagining that happens. Going to the next slide, affiliated community members. There's a lot of conversation too about, like, should these folks be from organizations, not from organizations? Should they just be sort of the everyday, regular, degular members in the community? One of the things that we really think about is, of course, we're not telling groups in community like, hey, the place for you to have your discussion or to have conversation with governments has to be at the anti-displacement working group, right? Of course, we're not going around community saying, this is the only place that you can talk about it. But we know, and of course within that, we know that community is having conversations and organizations are moving recommendations, organizing constituencies, outside of this process. So how do we bring a table where those folks who are doing that have a space to then talk about it within this work? So how can we all have the same conversation at the same time? Of course, I'm hoping, I've heard, and believe that it is possible within this anti-displacement working group. And so the thought is, once again, not getting overly connected to the numbers here, but finding those organizations who are particularly organizing around housing or anti-displacement within the corridor, and particularly the small businesses or business associations that are owned and operated, I think firstly by people of color, but generally folks who have been around for a while and might be struggling to stay open. We already know that those are the folks who are going to be the most vulnerable to displacement moving forward. And so within the sort of affiliated context or the sort of reason why they're being here, we have some sort of organizational responsibilities that we're hoping that these folks can take on. One, we want them to structure recommendations and interests from their organizations back to the anti-displacement working group. So if you've been hearing stuff on the ground, we want to build our communication channel out through these groups back to the anti-displacement working group. Ultimately, we'll be doing a lot of focus groups and interviews, and so our hope is that they connect their constituencies and members to our research team. So then when we are doing that qualitative research, that we have that sort of recruiting pool to get back from. Of course, we're thinking about bias, and we'll recruit more broadly than that too. But then also just to generally participate in the anti-displacement working group strategies, that I talked about a couple slides ago. So thinking about building our communication network, knowing that this work has been happening for a long time, how to get some of these folks, some of these organized folks who have institutions or organizations behind them into the fold and in conversation through the anti-displacement working group. The next slide talks about folks who are non-affiliated. We'll be generally just looking for people who live around the corridor. We want youth, we want people that have experienced displacement, people at risk of displacement, and just general residents that live within the Blue Line Extension corridor. Maybe some of these folks or all these folks embody multiple of these identities, and I think that's a really great thing. But we'll be digging deep within our networks to get folks who, and I think this goes for both non-affiliated and for affiliate community representatives. We know that there's a lot of folks who have been at the table, who are at other seats at the table, whether that's part of the cohort within the CAC or BAC. They're really trying to find new, fresh voices within the corridor, or new faces who may not have had a seat at any other table to have a seat at this table. Again, we know we're working with a broad range of engagement, and so we're just thinking about the best way to sort of exist and complement to that, but also find a seat for that to exist in this space too. And then lastly, going to the next slide, we're hoping for the philanthropic folks. We know, in the Green Line, the existing Green Line between downtown Minneapolis and downtown St. Paul, there's things like the Central Corridors Collaborative, which are largely funded by the philanthropic our sector, as well as a lot of investment was leveraged from philanthropic dollars, both supporting human power, but then also development along the way. And that, some might say was a very successful structure, but either way, you would argue that philanthropy will play a large role on whatever the outcomes or the approach to addressing displacement within the Blue Line Extension corridor. So we need to bring those folks into this conversation as quickly, too. And so that's the thought about having 3 members from 3 different philanthropies. First, we're looking for folks who are already programmatically interested in both anti-displacement or generally equity and those sort of things. Their programs are already focused within this corridor. They have a footprint within this corridor. We're not trying to find ways necessarily for their existing programs to be molded for this process, but ultimately we want them to find new areas or areas of opportunity for the philanthropic support of the recommendation. So instead of going, from philanthropy to this group, I'm really going from this group to philanthropy about the needs. Really to structure those learning back to the foundations and, build the support, build the programmatic, guidelines or interest around the anti-displacement work within this corridor. I think that has to happen at the beginning instead of sort of at the end of it, right? And I think that's just for all of us that we're really thinking about. So those are the members that we're generally pointed towards getting. The meeting structure, going to the next slide. Instead of going for 18 meetings month to month, which I think is just hard to do in this climate, right? Folks are just burnt out already. It's really hard to keep folks' attention at the end of the day after they've worked the whole day. Maybe they have, like me, kids running around the house. It's really hard to focus, and you sort of get people who don't show up to every meeting, and then it's really hard to sort of build that base of knowledge over time. So instead of doing that, we've recommended doing 4 full-day Saturday meetings instead, where we really do the data deep dives around the research. We have speakers from community, governments, private interests, whatever it might be, right? We really, really focus and get folks' attention. I almost think about this, I teach at the U, thinking about this in the context of a classroom. People are much better focused on one topic if they're just there all day. And we can go out, we have lots of food, we can have childcare. Let's really create an environment where folks can really focus. We'll have 4 themes. So 1, the learnings from existing blue and green lines and previous blue line extension work. So one of those full Saturday meetings will be about that. Then we'll jump to housing and cultural displacement, business displacement, and then we'll have one where we're really about finalizing the recommendations, right? I think we get more value in those 4 full Saturday meetings than we probably get over 18, say 2-hour meetings over the course of 18 months. In support of that, going to the next slide, so we really focused on those meetings, but in between we'll have 4 1.5 2-hour weekday meetings where it's about advising the research and engagement, orientation, setting up those meetings, and then one final 2-hour meeting at the end of it. So we'll have some smaller support meetings that are in support of those large meetings where we can really focus, but we won't use those as the time to sort of dive into it. However, if anti-displacement working group members have a need for more meetings, we're going to leave that to them to call them. And we'll leave them to call them about very specific subjects. So say, for example, let's spend 1 hour on Kira's rent stabilization report that we recently produced for the city of Minneapolis. Okay, we can call them 1-hour meetings, and the members who find that really important can show up. Or if they're saying, hey, Met Council, we need to know more about Livable Communities Act and how that might make sense in this, right? We may not get to all that within an 8-hour meeting, but we can have 1-hour meeting where we really focus on that. The Met Council can bring their staff to really focus on that, to talk about the context that it comes from, right? We can really dive into very specific topics when we need to do that, but we'll have that flexibility around the group's interest as they make sense and present themselves in the context of the group. So jumping to the next slide, ultimately that's what we're thinking. That's the group, that's the meetings. The process then becomes, we'll have the application go live on December 20th, which is next Monday. Ooh. We'll have that open through January 14th. It'll be hosted on Kira's webpage, but of course, we're working with Hennepin County, the Met Council in particular, to get this out. I assume that it will also follow with the cities themselves and a lot of other communication channels. We're going to be really saturated about getting folks into this group. We'll lead the interview process, but we'll have 1 BAC and 1 CAC member join the interview process as well. So as we get applications, we'll interview those folks to get a better sense of who they are, and then make a selection together around who that ultimate around 21 members will be. The first meeting we're projecting will be in early February, which will be one of those smaller meetings, will be the orientation, solidifying research agenda. The great part about going to a smaller meeting structure is that we've already begun the work. So it's like, it may not be showing up, but we've already begun the work, right? The research, we're hiring GRAs, we're pouring through the qualitative and quantitative stuff. But we don't have to be as much in a rush to get to that first meeting because we're going to have a lot of time, which is great. Leaves us a lot of time to do a lot of things in between around this group, both individually and in community. So that's what we're thinking. I'm not sure if there's any questions or if we have time for questions, but that's what we're thinking.
You've run through a lot of material. Thank you, C. Terrence. This is really important. And let me just say a couple of things quickly. I think you have started the process. This is just really important to have this kind of inclusive and thoughtful. And honestly, I think the ultimate goal here is not just to study. We actually want to lead to action and actually tangible results. And that's not easy. And I know that in part of that is results that will result in what the community has identified, and maybe even some healing, because as of past infrastructure projects haven't gone so well, and I've been seeing that. And I think that we as policymakers really need to kind of embrace this process. This is new, and this is something that with this kind of important infrastructure project, we're approaching it in a way that could be transformative, and allowing the community, voices to be with us every step of the way. This is kind of this I think is an important way to kind of access that and kind of make sure that we're honoring those voices as we build a bigger vision. So I could wax on. I know others could. I would just say that Commissioner Fernando and I are engaged on a national level to kind of talk about this with great promise and aspirations. So we got to get this right. So anyway, let's have a couple of minutes for some few questions or comments. And I know maybe Commissioner Lundy, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just thank you, Chair. Just want to thank Terrence for the great overview, and we're really excited. My office, we're working on trying to establish that network of funders because we think the task force is going to come up with some really serious recommendations, and they're going to require cash. And so we think that we've been working on a model. We've met with some of the people who founded the Central Corridor Funding Collaborative, and we fully anticipate there'll be a BOTNO Corridor Funding Collaborative that will be designed to help make sure that the benefits are stayed in the community, that people like the Minority Contract Association, other people are there to take advantage of the work, to put people to work. And so I just want to say we're working in anticipation of people coming up with some awesome recommendations and saying, okay, now, show me the money, because it's going to take money to do some of this stuff. And we think they deserve every last bit of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other quick thoughts?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that there's already some forethought about the BOTNO funding collaborative. That's great. And the comment that I was going to make was that not only should we provide money, but we need to provide resources. We have a lot of brilliant and experienced staff in Hennepin County and at the Metropolitan Council and at our city levels that can provide resources to community leaders so that they can be a part of the process of self-determination for their community benefits.
Mm-hmm. Great point. Just some of our existing programs, like you mentioned, some of our livability and some of the grants we're doing in community development.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're gonna just keep moving. Listen, I just look forward to further reports to both us as a full committee, but also clearly our staying close to the community advisory committee, the business advisory committees as well. Let's get a move to Sophia and Dan Solar. We're going to kind of review a major milestone, which was, as I understand, just this past Monday, the release of the draft route modification report. It's exciting to see the culmination of a lot of engagement, a lot of technical work we've been talking about for this past year, and thrilled to see the draft report coming out. So take it away, Sophia. And Dan.
Thank you, Chair Zelli and committee. I'm going to start covering some of the beginning slides, and then Dan's going to jump in. Jason, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. Well, Terrence is a hard act to follow, but we will do our best to keep you engaged in all of the work and information that we've put together to really tell you about these routes and the Blue Line, the benefits of the Blue Line investment. So what we're going to go through today is we're going to show you how the project stacks up against the goals. And you all helped create and inform those goals back starting in March when we released kind of the routes. And this report is really the culmination of this almost year of work where we've really advanced the technical information from looking at what routes we're going to, identifying station study areas, and really thinking about how LRT could fit within these communities and all those details, as well as the very robust engagement and feedback and loops that we've had with the community over that time. We have a lot of slides, and we'll be conscious of time as well as we go through those. So some we'll spend a little bit more time on, some we might skip through a little bit faster, just so that we are respectful of all of your schedules as well. Next slide, please. So before I go into all of this, I think one of the main messages I just want to deliver is that we have some really good options to move forward with. And what we'll kind of go through today is going to demonstrate that. And each of the project goals is ranked against basically poor, good, or excellent, and that's how it's assessed. If a goal is marked as poor, it means that it didn't stack up, right? It didn't do what we wanted to do. If it's good, it means it meets the project goals and has the benefit, can bring benefit to community. If it's excellent, not only can it bring benefit to community, but there's something unique in the characteristic about that particular piece, or has the benefit to deliver exemplary positive benefit, like, really just touches on this goal. For those that maybe haven't dived in deeply into the report yet, preview, there's no poors on the list, right? This is a really good project that we're pulling together. Next slide. We'll go through the next slide pretty quick. So just these are the 6 goals we're going to walk through real quick as a reminder, and we'll go into them in more detail as the slides advance. Slides advance. I will go through specifically Area 2, so kind of southern Brooklyn Park through Robbinsdale, as well as the Minneapolis alignments with each goal. But before I do that, I would be remiss not to acknowledge that Brooklyn Park in Area 1, there are no changes, right? We would be preserving all of their stations, and that's consistent with our project principles to maintain the alignment as much as possible. All the good work that happened in the environmental process to identify who we're serving, all of that can remain the same. And it also gives us the opportunity, the city has done a lot in terms of their transit-oriented development and really thinking about their investment in that corridor. And so they can just continue to keep all that good work and build upon it as we continue to move forward. Next slide. So the first goal, which is I think the core of Metro Transit and what we do and what we've been trying to do, is to improve transit access and connections to jobs and regional destinations. So the first there's a few things that feed into that goal. The first 3 of those are really about kind of that improvement in transit, your reverse commute or off-peak options, the ability to serve folks that don't have cars, kind of your connections to linkages and other things, as well as just where are our major destinations? Are we reaching them? Are we getting to them? And so looking at that. So if we go into Area 2 and that specific goal and how it stacks up. Next slide. We find for Area 2 that we score excellent. At the 63rd and Bass Lake Road, we're keeping basically a lot of the project principles, right? The reasons that we're doing that before, we had stationaries before, stayed the same. There's a lot of both jobs and accesses to regional destinations. As we get into Robbinsdale, not only are you serving the downtown, but you're serving a major employer, which is North Memorial, as well as kind of providing a connection to the parks. Next slide. In area 3 in Minneapolis, now we're looking at 2 options. We have Lowry and West Broadway. And so looking at Lowry first, and this is also similar on West Broadway, is that we're serving neighborhoods with both high numbers of folks that have no access to personal vehicles, lower income households, and a large portion of residents of color. We are able to connect to some regional destinations along this route. And one of the kind of trade-offs between West Broadway and Lowry is that Lowry is longer. So we do pick up a couple extra station areas along the way. So there's 5 stations instead of 3, but a few of those stations have some of the constraints of I-94 and the Mississippi River. So that's a factor as we kind of look at all of these. Going to West Broadway in the next slide. Oh, sorry, one more. This is our summary table of kind of where those numbers come from. So you can kind of see where we pick up zero-car households along the way. You have a good chunk of jobs as we leave the North Loop area, and there's kind of a breakdown of populations for those that like to geek out on the numbers. Next slide, please. So kind of to highlight some of those things that are similar to Lowry you saw on the previous slides, but West Broadway also really hits the commercial heart of North Minneapolis. We've heard quite a lot from folks about where they spend their time and how, and a lot of those destinations are on West Broadway. Next slide. Again, your summary table where you can kind of see where we're picking up a lot of folks, both our Penn and Emerson Fremont Station have served quite a lot of folks. Next slide. Going into goal 2, and this is really about transit as well as the frequency and reliability of our service to communities in the corridors. We're trying to improve mobility of people that ride with us today, right? That is the core of Metro Transit service, right? To make what we're providing service performance continually better, as well as attracting new riders. And it's kind of that connection to our regional system. That's a big part of what we're looking at here. We also have to balance that with traffic mobility. So kind of going into how that stacks up. Next slide. We find that in area 2 that it is excellent. So we're able to provide transit in a transit facility, connect to a whole bunch of places, and we're able also to balance the traffic mobility along County Road 81. We will obviously have to work with both cities to address their concerns about safety and traffic, but overall the level of service does not change that much. Next slide. For Lowry, we're able to increase connections as well as connecting to our metro system with the C and D lines. It receives a good. We do have impacts to our traveling public in other ways, and on Lowry we would have places that you'd be adding unsignalized intersections. So some streets would become right in, right out. So that's a factor that we have to balance. Going to the next slide. Again, and West Broadway, we can improve overall transit service to the community. West Broadway in particular has the ability to attract new riders. We're providing connections to our metro system. It's just a really kind of efficient and good connection, and a lot of regional destinations. So with that, I will turn it over to Dan to go through the next 4 goals in an efficient manner, so we don't talk for too long.
Thank you. Thank you, Sophia. Good reminder for me to, not take until 7 o'clock tonight to talk about this. So yeah, as Sophia said, we have 6 goals. And so I'm going to cover these next 4 goals and how they were evaluated and how our team saw them. The first one being this goal 3, which was about providing transit improvements that maximize transit benefits, which is always important, but while also not only minimizing impacts by being cost competitive and economically viable. As we compete with a project like this for federal funds, in the scenario of the federal CIG program, while cost effectiveness index is not a controlling factor as it had been in the past, it's still an important piece of what we do. And so we want to build, in essence, we simply want to build the best project we can, providing the most benefit while minimizing impacts and understanding operating, maintenance, and capital costs. So with regard to the next slide, with regard to area 2 in Brooklyn Park, Crystal, and Robbinsdale, one of the pieces, of course, is that this project is primarily proposed as an at-grade LRT system in public right-of-way. So that alone makes it cost competitive. We're not going over going over private property. We're minimizing right-of-way acquisition. While we're not able to eliminate any right-of-way acquisition, we're able to minimize it by using street running service. There are some structures and grade separations that will be proposed. Certainly costs associated with both capital and maintenance of grade separations are greater. We've proposed them where they are needed and where they can help move either vehicular or LRT traffic efficiently, but not the entire route. And so that helps make it cost competitive. We've built street running LRT in the Twin Cities. We understand how that works from a maintenance and operations standpoint. We will work with our maintenance team at Metro Transit to make sure we're building something that operates within the overall transit system as well. So that's part about area 2 and area 3 in Minneapolis, on the next slide, either Lowry or West Broadway, essentially really the same factors. Is why we'll need to build some grade separation, say across I-94 as we come in. A lot of this will be street running LRT with that operates within the context of our existing system to make it both consistent with other lines we have, but also to make it cost competitive. Now, if there are parts of the alignment that from both a community and impact statement, it makes more sense to do a different design, those are certainly not off the table, but just in general, this type of system, we believe, has been and continues to be a cost competitive system on our transit here in the Twin Cities. Okay, so we can move to goal 4. Next slide. Goal 4 is around supporting community development goals. And of course, so now this is a little different. This is not about what the LRT looks like or how it operates, but is the routes that are being recommended, would building LRT there help support consistency with plans and comprehensive plans and policies related to redevelopment and affordable housing and such in these communities? Is there a capacity and likelihood of TOD and or redevelopment opportunities around the station areas along these routes? So with regard to area 2, the next slide, in Robbinsdale, Brooklyn Park, and Bristol, essentially up at the 63rd Bass Lake Road and downtown Robbinsdale stations, we feel, yes, that previously done station area planning around those areas show that each of those areas has some opportunity for development, redevelopment, and other investments that it fits within there. Building along the corridor at 63rd, there's open property there that's available for redevelopment. We've talked about some opportunities. City of Crystal has already done some good things in terms of some streetscaping along Bass Lake Road, doing and improving Becker Park. They were already kind of first to the game in terms of improving the areas around stations. As we talk about an alternative on 81, and potentially being in the roadway there, how we maybe develop around the quadrants and fit there are opportunities there. And in downtown Robbinsdale, a lot of those opportunities not only are available, but already exist. Robbinsdale has certainly done some great things with the development of the High V and some of the higher multiple family housing and such along there are certainly there, as well as serving the downtown. So we believe that this does score as excellent in area 2 for supporting eventual community development. In area 3, on the Lowry route, this does, as it comes up Washington Avenue, it's pretty much developed now. We've got the freeway on one side, so there isn't much opportunity obviously there. The area there is pretty developed, and how it might change along Washington Avenue is still kind of a question mark. So that maybe doesn't rate as excellent, more as good. We do connect to get close to the possibility of some type of a connection to Upper Harbor Terminal, even though we make the turn there at Washington onto Lowry, but that's a fairly close proximity. As you go down Lowry, there are opportunities that exist there. There's some land that's vacant, a bunch of land that's owned by Hennepin County or the city of Minneapolis. It is primarily residential. There aren't maybe as many opportunities for redevelopment along Lowry as you'll see when we come along West Broadway, but those opportunities are certainly there. We rank this as good for supporting community development. And then West Broadway in goal 4, we find again as excellent. This corridor coming up West Broadway does serve the heart of the West Broadway Business District. So as you come up from Lyndale and then traverse up West Broadway into Robbinsdale, that is generally retail and commercial and business along there. The community does have goals of revitalization along here. So as we've worked with the various entities along here, we've talked a lot about what could be and what might be in terms of community redevelopment along here. And there are also undeveloped parcels that are vacant, parcels that are owned by public entities, all that provide opportunities for development and redevelopment. And especially as we talk about just the entire piece, there's pockets along there where we would be building upon previously improved things. The Capri Theater has been rebuilt, the YMCA, the Sherman development is going in. Up at Penn, there's some redevelopment that's occurred, and so it's really building upon that and continuing to further the goals of the community in this area. So again, in this goal, we find West Broadway rates as excellent. Okay, going to goal 5. Goal 5 is a lot about environmental practices. It's a lot about healthy communities. It's a lot about climate change. Are we able to minimize impacts to natural and cultural resources? What kind of access and connections do we have to recreation, to healthy food options that can help provide those benefits to the BLRT communities that are along this route? How can we build and enhance the adjacent environment around the LRT line so that we've got sidewalks and trail connections and full accessibility so that people either rolling or walking or biking, how they can use transit and healthy living, if you will, healthy choices to get to and from transit. And then will we reduce some greenhouse gas, reduce vehicle miles traveled? This is an electric, while this is, an electric train, will we be reducing some vehicle traffic? Can we get more people to utilize transit? We've got some measurements around that we see as well. So this one is really all about health and environment. So on area 2, providing LRT along 81 in the current roadway minimizes impacts to parks and cultural assets, and allows us to enhance upon, build transit where it's close to already existing bike and pedestrian facilities. You're going to see this in each of our 3 analyses. We do believe that just simply the building of LRT and additional transit and minimizing VMT meets and helps advance the goals of both the state's and the county's climate action plans. And for us at Hennepin County, it's important that in any transportation improvement that we do, that we look at how we both design it and operate it to meet our Hennepin County Climate Action Plan. And we believe we have a lot of opportunities in the implementation of an LRT project to do that. It provides access up here to grocery stores, to regional parks. And so certainly building LRT in Robbinsdale does that. But we also have to watch out for and be cognizant of how we're working around parks, such as like at North Memorial, where we have access to the park and the grand rounds, and how we continue to look at environmental impacts along here and mitigate those as part of advancing the project. So we see area 2 as ranking as good. Area 3, Lowry, on the next slide, also rates as good. We would be making numerous roadway and overall safety improvements, and so therefore, providing better pedestrian and bicycle access to the various station areas. We think this does certainly help advance the climate action plans, as I stated before. There is access to groceries and to other health amenities and regional parks in and along the route. But this also has, and we have to be aware of, environmental and social and cultural resource impacts. Lowry does okay in each of those measures, but we still see this more as rating good in this measure. And in fact, as you'll see on the next slide for West Broadway, we rate this one as good. In each of these categories, we're very balanced on We think that an LRT system can help advance climate action goals, and that is actually rates very high. But at the same time, each of these routes will have impacts to adjacent properties, and needing to really get down and evaluate those environmental impacts and those mitigation measures will be clear. So a lot of the same things here in providing those. We do, a West Broadway route does reduce more vehicle miles traveled in the models than Lowry. So that ranks a little bit higher there. And of course, we've heard a lot, certainly on all of these routes, but even more so on West Broadway, the need to mitigate the impacts during construction. That becomes very key. And so how we do that with the existing businesses along there is an important environmental concern and an important issue for us to have good answers for on how we'll address that, because that has a key measure along all of the various. This is little bit, in my mind, a little bit like what we did on University Avenue on West Broadway, where we had to pay significant concern to impacts to businesses along the route as we did construction. So all three of these routes do rank as good in the analysis. So this takes us to the last goal. This is the final one. Goal 6 is about these projects and their ability to advance local and regional equity, and how we can work towards disparity reduction on these. Again, at Met Council in Hennepin County, building projects with equity and reducing racial disparities is our key measures. We want to make sure that we build a project that doesn't only avoid impacts, but also helps build up and really bring equity into this. So do we have opportunities to invest in historically disinvested communities? How does this help that? How do we minimize displacement of residents? The goal here is to build an LRT line to serve the communities where it runs, and not to, displace folks and replace it with any other communities. And so part of this goal was reached for the project is on its path based on the formation of the Anti-Displacement Working Group. And so that aims to be part of that. But also we want to make sure that we preserve and enhance the communities here by continuing to improve the connection and with the other community assets and cultural assets here. I mean, if you've heard Commissioner Fernando talks a lot about the areas in and along West Broadway and how station areas along there can help make them not only more accessible, but how we can really highlight and bring out those community and cultural assets and to honor the whole heritage and character of the communities along here. So that'll be a very big part of what we want to do. We also want to minimize the short-term and long-term impacts, tremendous impacts. We need to be able to make sure that as we include right-of-way acquisition and construction and all of these other property impacts, that we minimize them so that it isn't just like we're taking advantage of working in these communities and moving this forward. So in area 2 for this goal, we think there's definitely an opportunity to minimize right-of-way acquisition and present a right-of-way line through Robbinsdale that fits in and along Highway 81. We believe that this puts Robbinsdale, Crystal, and Brooklyn Park all in an area that helps provide connectivity to the greater Twin Cities and the greater region. This Blue Line extension, of course, provides for these communities direct connection on a metro line, which provides access then to Blue Line to the south, Green Line to the east and west through downtown, and helps put this area of the Twin Cities and of Hennepin County on a more equitable footing with all kinds of other areas around the county, because it has the density and the ability to get people to those areas. But it also helps further regional equity, because Brooklyn Park and Crystal are environmental justice communities, and we want to take advantage of bringing and providing to those communities an LRT route and a connection to the regional system. So we think that this goal also evaluates as good here in Area 2. In Area 3 on Lowry, we believe that this does support community wealth building in an area that has historically had limited investment. While we've done some work on Lowry at Hennepin County in the past, the opportunity to put this segment on the map with a major transit connection has not happened. And so certainly we've recognized that I-94 construction through here kind of divided things a little bit from the east and west side of and around Washington Avenue. We believe that then a transit improvement like that has the ability to help support wealth building here. But it also requires that we address things like parking along Lowry and Washington Avenue, though we do understand now we did see more parking along Washington Avenue than anywhere else along this route. We have learned in our work with the city that a lot of that was semi-tractor trailer parking along Washington, which by ordinance is going to not be allowed any longer. But still, we need to watch the roadway and other impacts along here to not provide disinvestment, but better investment into these parts of the city. And then on West Broadway for Goal 6, we do see this area as rating excellent as a way where we can actually do and build up community wealth building. Again, we've talked about before, this West Broadway corridor is the commercial district in this part of Minneapolis. It's highly valued by the community. It's a significant asset and a significant place to provide an area which historically has had limited investment. And so we think bringing this investment here has the potential to really support community wealth building and make North Minneapolis a place where really everyone in the metro would like to work, live, play, dine out, do whatever kinds of things. And so if we can utilize LRT to help stimulate growth in this area, we see that as a real benefit. We also know that there are some very tight spots along here. So as part of our analysis and as part of our work on this option, we have several design options, primarily around the West Broadway and Penn and the West Broadway and Emerson Fremont area, that provide opportunities to build this improvement, but to minimize impact. So things like, providing some one-way pairs with West Broadway and 21st, and how we locate the station and build turn lanes at West Broadway and Penn. We've got numerous options for those so that we can build up the project and minimize the impacts. So that runs through all of our goals. Sophia, I'll let you cover the summary, which is on the next slide, which kind of shows if you take all 6 goals and all 3 of these routes, how they all stack up against the goals. And you can see, as Sophia said, there's no poor areas here. Each of these 3 segments definitely rates at least good for any kind of an LRT improvement, and then a numerous excellence built in as well.
Thank you, Dan. I think you covered the message of the summary matrix. And if we go to the next slide, we want to make sure that there's ample opportunity over the next 45 days for our community partners and stakeholders to really weigh in and tell us if we're missing anything, so that we can move forward with a lot of confidence in making a recommendation later this spring. So we have meetings coming up in every community, as well as some virtual meetings to kind of balance that all out. And we'll get to it in the next segment a little bit of what we've done so far, but really trying to lean into the community engagement to get people to participate. And so to the extent in your networks, it's sometimes a neighborhood group or a community stakeholder wants to give pretty detailed comments, but it can even be very simple. And so we're really trying to encourage community members just to tell us how they feel about it all. So it doesn't, even though there's a big technical document, trying to make it accessible. And sometimes that summary table of, hey, does this, even without all, you don't necessarily dig into all the data, but does this feel right to you? Does this feel the direction that we're going? So meetings coming up. And then last slide that I will cover in this section before turning it back to Chair Zelli is just to kind of give an overall timeline. The comment period goes through January 25th. If we say 45 days, but we added a few days, quite a few days for holidays and acknowledging all of that. And then we would anticipate coming back to you to kind of let you know what we heard during that 45 days. And then later in the spring, coming out with a final route modification report that would contain a recommendation of how to move forward. That would just tee us up to begin our environmental process and dive deeper both into the technical analysis and engagement to develop this project. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Chair.
Boy, thank you, Sophia and Dan. That is a lot of material, but I have to say the way it's framed through our project goals that we all identified going into this process and how we are now, those are kind of been the guiding lights, and that's kind of a good way to frame a lot of this feedback. So I really, really appreciate that. And also, now we're in a phase of seeing how people feel. So this is the reactions I know are probably already coming in, but we'll have a lot to learn. And I encourage all of us as committee members to try to drive as much reaction as possible through those various meetings. Anyway, any questions or thoughts for Dan and Sophia at this point?
Hey, Chair, this is Abdi, alternate for Mayor Fry here.
Yeah,
And
hi,
I just
Abdi.
wanted to share, first of all, I just wanted to thank staff for the report. And I also wanted to share a few challenges as we sort of enter into this stage of the process. The Minneapolis City Council is going through transition, as you all may know. And despite a lot of great outreach, we've heard over and over that the participation rates for recent Minneapolis forums were lower than one might expect, and we've heard the holidays and et cetera. And I just want to say that as the project continues on this phase here, that additional outreach planned, that we will be in Minneapolis encouraging residents to access additional engagement. So I just wanted to acknowledge the challenges that we face here and the importance of all of us coming together on this.
Yeah, thank you, Abdi. Great point. And it's not just this time of year, a transition for the city council, and what I've heard through this COVID times that fewer people are returning surveys, fewer people are showing up for forums. I mean, we've all kind of been, stressed in terms of what's being called upon, and I know that's really true for the community. So that, and I think that's why we'll get into this a little bit, but hats out to our engagement team because we actually recognize that we have to go to where people are, and that means door knocking. That means every venue, and a really great point to kind of make sure we're reaching out and also giving the time that we'll need over the next little bit. But yeah,
and Chair, I can say certainly for our outreach team, I certainly want to give our outreach staff, a ton of kudos, as well as all the staffs from all of the municipalities in helping us. We have tried so many different ways, and we're going to keep doing that. We've used help with the community engagement cohort, which was a little bit new for us as a team to bring people on to help with that. We've been at driveway meetings. We've had open houses in person and virtually and at public places and with masks and outside. We've done things outside when we could. I mean, we've done all kinds of different things to try to get to as much outreach as we can. Even, and like you say, if Sophia hears of anyone, I mean, literally anyone along here who wants to know more, she's in contact with them and they're having a visit. And so to that end, we're trying, and we'll continue to do. I mean, Abdi brings up a good point. We would love as much engagement as we could get. So we'll continue to work on those pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts, comments?
Yeah, Mayor Adams here.
Mayor Adams, yeah.
Sure. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see your hand there. Go ahead.
No, that's
Mayor
okay.
Adams.
I've looked at this report and, I look at the crystals, how crystals represented here, especially in the engagement area. It doesn't talk much about some of the interface that we've had as a council or as staff. And I understand it's maybe that's community engagement other than politicals. But also when we look at some of the drawings of what happens in Crystal, none of what we've talked about from a staff level and from a council level is reflected in here. And that kind of concerns me. We've had some interesting experience, when we had the old alignment about, not being heard or not being heard quickly enough before this gets put into motion. And I don't want to make that mistake again. So in this report, when we look at the drawings, we've been asking for, something that maintains our ability to travel 3 lanes of traffic through Crystal. There's an awful lot of things in any alignment where it reduces vehicle traffic. That's something we've been working towards for many, many years to make that corridor accessible both to the Northwest and to Minneapolis. And as we have these drawings, it starts to imprint in people's mind what it might look like. I don't want that imprint in there. Quite frankly, I feel like we haven't been heard. And I have to say something at this point to say, look, we talked about pedestrian crossing and having safety within the pedestrian crossing. And based on the last alignment with no pedestrian bridge, we made that a principle to start out with. There's nothing in this report that talks anything about or indicates that there's going to be any type of crossing. I know we've talked about it with the project office, but it feels like it's being pulled back already. And then when we take a look at our request for maintaining our lanes of traffic, it's nowhere on the radar. So this is very concerning at this early stage that we're seeing, I guess, our concerns not being heard.
I appreciate your candor, and I don't know if Dan or Nick, who's here, want to comment on that.
Well, Charlie, I just might mention that. So we are currently, the report has been laid out to start to guide towards the recommended route for the LRT. It will not probably and unlikely address any and all design aspects for any parts of the corridor. Now, we know more about what's going on in Crystal than we do in Minneapolis. So we're advancing the design efforts in Crystal a little more. And so I think the issues, Mayor, that you bring up about lane configurations and, the pedestrian areas and pedestrian connections at Bass Lake Road, those are all continuing, ongoing. We're working on those forward. And to the extent that we can formally identify any of those in the final report, then we should do that. And so we'll know more even in January, as well. You'll know more next week, Mayor, from an update from staff, and then we will be with the council to look at various options in more detail, especially around Bass Lake Road and along the corridor. So we will, if we can build those into the final report. We got to be careful, is we don't want to put too many fine point details into the final report before we remember, this doesn't set in place the final design. This just sets in place the route to continue the project on, and then the environmental impact statement and we still have to go through the whole environmental process. We don't want to set in absolute the final design of what it's going to look like until we go through that environmental piece. And so, Mayor, I will tell you that we are completely still on board. We understand where Crystal is. I believe we have heard what the concerns were, and so when you see, we've got drawings that you'll see at Crystal in the upcoming weeks that show a refined interchange option at Bass Lake Road with much better station areas. You'll find a at-grade option that widens us to 6 lanes in that area and shows an at-grade station with a pedestrian bridge. Those pieces are all part of our conceptual design options right now. So concerns very much. I understand your concerns. I think I do. But know that we still have a ways to go before we put this all in its final form.
All right. Well, thanks, Dim. And Jim, your concern has been noted. And maybe to address maybe a similar question from Riva in the chat, talking about some of the station planning. Is that in terms of sequencing? That's also is that kind of fine tuning, or is that happen later?
Yes, as we kind of, there's places where there has been stationary planning and we want to build upon that. And then also, we need to kind of select said route in Minneapolis so that we can actually do the work, which is, led by Hennepin County.
All right, I know that this is, and we can go deep, but we're here choosing a route, but it's always important to kind of visualize what that is. So that's important. And Mayor, did you have another comment, or is that a?
Yeah, I think
ahead.
so. I understand the process. I've been through the process, and that's, I really want to stress the fact that we've been asking for the last, I don't know, this whole last phase, and we still haven't seen. And respectfully, Dan, that's great that we see it next time. It should have been last time or the time before. So I just want to emphasize that patience, it kind of running out. So I hope we do see what we asked for. I'd love to. So thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, well, I think stay tuned. Great work, and actually thanks to all the partners here in this meeting, because these are many voices. There's individual concerns. There's a larger picture, and it's going to happen not by just a project team laying out a plan, but by all this interaction and this conversation. So we're going to have to work on these issues and identify. The fine tune the analysis as we shape the future of the study. Let's move into a report on the November engagement. This was a lot of the feedback that we heard that helped shape this first draft report. So Sophia, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. I am going to just give you some summary statistics because November really represented a kind of culmination of all the work we were doing, right? This year has built upon itself. I know we get a lot of comments about, is there enough engagement? But we also have to remember that for the past year, we've been asking one fundamental question, which is, do you prefer Lowry or West Broadway? And we've given increasing levels of information to the community about that. And then in Robbinsdale and Crystal and Brooklyn Park, it's been those details of, hey, let's confirm this route. Does this new placement kind of work? So so building upon that in terms of the route selection to station areas to the technical design details that even the mayor was just previously referencing, right? It gives us the package. And so we really hope we've really brought the community along with us so that, when the draft report that we just went over, that, that there shouldn't have been anything too surprising. We hope we accomplish that. And part of what went into that is if you add our November totals, I particularly want to highlight we've had over 270 events with folks, and that has reached almost 9,000 individuals within the corridors. We've through a variety of methods, and we're short on time, so I won't spend too much on the next few slides. But I just want to kind of reassure the community that we are using multiple methods to try to get to people. And so, next slide, please, Jason. I should say we had overall, before I get to that, the overall themes, and I think fairness has been one of them, as well as throughout the corridor, it's pedestrian and station safety, as well as our support for businesses during construction. So just acknowledging that as well, and going to the next slide. To that point of, not everybody wants to come out to an open house. And so the tenant of myself and the folks at Hennepin County and others that have been helping with our engagement efforts is to try to seek people out to the extent possible. And when we've gone out, the community reflects that back to us as, we want you to come to us, right? And so that is, as we move through the next months, that's what we're going to do. You hear different things doing different things, and I think that's important to acknowledge too. And for example, when you do door knocking to small businesses, you hear about how they want to see the work and investment that sometimes even Terrence referenced benefit them, right? How do you not just benefit larger developers, but small individual businesses that are wanting to grow? Going to the next slide. Part of how we got to what we showed in the report was from feedback from meeting with different groups. And in this slide, I also wanted to really acknowledge to the committee just the project commitment to reaching out to potentially impacted individuals. And so stakeholder check-ins referring both to various groups as well as individual properties that showed up on our maps in various ways. And, we hear very site-specific needs and desires from all of those. And we always bring that back into our engineering work as well as we advance the project. Slide. It's been like I said before, we think of all the ways that we have feedback. We continue to, hear some of the fundamental themes, and they've come with us throughout the year. And whether that's incorporating lessons that have been learned from green and blue line so that we really build that wealth, to various reasons of why you'd pick other options, sometimes framed in the way of, well, this option might reduce your impact, or this option would have potentially the best benefit if you do it right. So with that, I know we're over time, or getting close to over time. And so if Jason could advance to the last slide, I'll turn it back to, or one back, Jason. Turn it back to Chair Zelli.
Thank you. I know we're right at time. Sophia, you've done a great job, and we're really looking forward to hearing about what's going on in January. This is a really important month for engagement and more meetings. And it's, as we've just described, getting that during a difficult time is going to be challenging, but we're on it. At that, I really want to thank everybody. We have our next scheduled meeting was scheduled for January 13th, but it seems like we're really in the middle of those meetings and engagement. We're looking at maybe postponing that meeting and going right to February 10th, where we'll have a substantive conversations about the results of a lot of those feedback, and be able to continue hearing about our anti-displacement work along the way. So without any objection, I would suggest we do that. And I don't know if anybody has any last comments. We've covered a lot of material today, but I really appreciate everybody's spending the time with us at this meeting.
Yeah, Chair Zelli, it's Commissioner Fernando.
Hi.
Irene here. I just want to, I'm fine with the February timeline. I would just request that we're incredibly clear as to what the next steps are, and really making sure that partners and municipalities are engaged and understand where the work goes next. And I know that that's already underway, but wanted to highlight that if we're skipping January, then all the more reason to make sure that that's really, really clear in February.
Yeah, great point. This is an important phase, but it's important that we get the work out on the, as they say, in the community to get that really done in a good way. Thanks for that comment. Anyone else? Well, with that, again, thank you for all your work. It's going to continue, and this could be one-on-one, groups, conversations. It's a time for a lot of interaction. But in the meantime, have an enjoyable holiday break, hopefully, and hope you find your cookies tasty and that your baking is enjoyable. And we'll see you before you know it.
Thanks,
This meeting's
everybody.
adjourned. Good to see you, and
Thanks. Take
be
care.
well. Yeah. Bye-bye.